Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here. I'm bringing you all an update to my Evilswarm Yugioh deck profile for December 2022. I'm a big fan of the Evilswarm in the dual terminal storyline, so I always like to update the deck. It's more of a control style deck, being able to lock your opponent out of special summoning level 5 or higher monsters thanks to Evilswarm Ophion, and that can take away from a lot of decks depending on the play style. So being able to get out Ophion and then also protect it with some of the other spells and traps we're running in the deck, including also some of the other extra deck monsters, can really make for an interesting control style deck that may even be able to, compete with some of the decks we see in the current format depending on what you go up against. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the Evilswarm main deck monsters, I run 3 copies of Evilswarm Caster. All the Evilswarm monsters have some pretty simplistic card effects. With Caster, during the turn of its normal summon, you can normal summon one Evilswarm monster in addition to your normal summoner set. So this just gives you an additional normal summon to go into your main go-to monster, which is Evilswarm Ophion, because Ophion also has spell and trap search power that you can use with detaching materials off of it. So 3 Caster, just easy for the summoning of your other cards. One of the easier monsters to summon out, thanks to cards like Rescue Rabbit, is also Evilswarm Yugioh, just being a normal monster, still counting as an Evilswarm monster, but still also having 1950 attack, makes it more of a pretty big boss monster to rely on against your opponent as well. And also 3 copies of Evilswarm Mandragora. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. So it all comes down to resources. If you don't have, less monsters than your opponent, you can even just summon it out with Caster as an additional normal summon. But if your opponent does have more monsters, you can always special summon the Mandragora first, and then summon out Caster, and then get your additional normal summon with that to have at least one more resource on the field for you to use. And I also run 3 copies of Evilswarm Kyrkion. You can only use each effect of Kyrkion once per turn. While this card's in your graveyard, if you have a sent this turn, you can normal summon one Evilswarm monster for 1 less tribute. But the main play with this card is you can banish one Evilswarm monster from your graveyard to target one card. It gains the following effects. You add that target to your hand, and also gains the effect of this card. You can also normal summon one additional Evilswarm monster with this activated effect this turn. So with it, you have the option of being able to banish an Evilswarm monster, targeting Evilswarm in your graveyard, and then just being able to normal summon it back into the field while the Kyrkion is on the field. So it's more setup, but another definite 3 of, with the last of the Evilswarm monsters being 2 Evilswarm Thunderbird. It's more of a situational card. That's why it's the only one of the Evilswarm main deck monsters that I'm running 2 of during either player's turn when a card effect is activated, except during the damage step. You can banish this card you control, and then during the next standby phase, return this card banished by this effect to the field. If you do, it gains 300 attack. So with it being able to, when a card effect is activated, even if your opponent were to try and target Thunderbird, you can at least go for the banish with this card, avoiding that target, since it'll be the last thing to respawn in the chain link, and then being able to avoid being either, targeted, destroyed, or anything by your opponent's card. For the other monsters that I run in the deck, I also run 3 copies of Rescue Rabbit. This is in the deck just because it can easily special summon out 2 Heliotrope onto the field for you to then overlay into your Evilswarm monster of choice. And lastly, the 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. You have Ophion to take care of your opponent's special summoning level 5 or higher monsters. If they need to try and get out another search, you can just at least have this hand trap to stop any of those plays. And opening up Ash Blossom doesn't really, disrupt any other play you may have, because you can have a 1-card combo to go into your main Xyz play, or even just need 2 Evilswarm monsters, which, depending on how you combo them, can work very well with one another. That is it for the main deck monsters. Moving on now to the spells. I run 2 copies of Infestation Pandemic. I really feel this is all you need for this card, because you can once again search it off of Evilswarm Ophion. All face-up Evilswarm monsters you currently control are unaffected by other spell or trap effects this turn. It just protects them from those spell and traps your opponent may try to use to get rid of them on the field, or even just to lower their attack, or like I said before, get rid of them on the field so they can at least go back to trying to summon out some of the other cards they have in their deck. I also run 3 copies of Unexpected Die, just for another way to summon out your Heliotrope if you didn't open up the Rescue Rabbit in your hand onto the field. And with the main attribute in the main deck being Dark, I'm running 2 copies of Allure of Darkness, just so you can go into some of the more important cards. There are situations where I open up, just the Thunderbird, so I go for the draw, hoping to hit something a little more viable than just 1 Thunderbird in hand. You really need, Caster or Rescue Rabbit, or even a Mandragora if your opponent has monsters, to initiate the main play for your Evilswarm monsters. And then for some of the lower numbers, for the spells, I run 1 Monster Reborn, along with 1 Call by the Grave, and 1 Reinforcements of the Army. For the Warrior Search, which the warrior in the deck is Caster, Call by the Grave to stop any graveyard plays, and Monster Reborn just to get that 1 additional resource back on the field for you to use. Moving on now to the traps, I run 1 Infestation Infection. Once per turn, you can shuffle 1 Evilswarm monster from your hand or face up on the field into the main deck to add 1 Evilswarm monster from your deck to your hand. So with this, you have a search for your cards back into your hand, being able to shuffle 1 Evilswarm monster from your hand or field back into the main deck to add 1 Evilswarm monster, depending on which one specifically you may need. Being able to add that card, and being an infestation card, it is also searchable off of your Evilswarm Ophion, making it all the better for you to add to your hand with this card, since it's just another one of. And I also run 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, same lineup with this card, and Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, just being able to stop your opponent, especially if they went first against you and they try and get off any of their main plays. You can use Infinite Impermanence to stop that. The big one I see this happen a lot with is when my opponent normal summons Alibur when I'm going up against Despia. Being able to use Impermanence or Ash Blossom just to stop that initial search can shut down a lot of the fusion plays they tried to resolve. And then for the other traps that I run in the main deck, 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. I love this card for the fact that you can activate this and chain Infestation Pandemic, protecting all of your Evilswarm monsters on the field and making it so all of your opponent's monsters will still be destroyed. With the last trap that I run in the main deck being 3 Goes in Match. Each player can only control 1 attribute of a monster. Send all other cards they control to the graveyard. So this can be used just so you have all of your main go-to attribute in the extra deck, which is Dark attribute, and your main deck. You're really never summoning Ash Blossom onto the field, so there's no worry there when you have to summon out other cards. It does lock you out of some of the targets we have in the extra deck, but still it'll hurt your opponent a lot more depending on the deck they're playing. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 3 copies of Evilswarm Ophion. Needs 2 level 4 Evilswarm monsters. While this card has Exceed Material, level 5 or higher monsters cannot be special summoned. And once per turn, you can detach 1 Exceed Material from this card to add 1 Infestation spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So this can be the search for your Infestation Pandemic. It could be the search for your Infestation Infection. You have all those options available to you. And your opponent may try to negate the effect of Ophion with cards like Impermanence or things like that. They can either go for the activation, and most of the time they'll try and go for it on their turn, because if they use Impermanence to at least stop the Infestation Pandemic, that'll be for the turn when they have no cards on their field, so they go for the Infinite Impermanence from their hand during your turn. And then you have an active Ophion the following turn, which they can either try to negate again. That's another resource in the hand they wasted. But by then you could also have let the search go by, and if they try and do it during their own turn, you can chain Infestation Pandemic, which you can set on the field, protecting your Ophion, making it unaffected by your opponent's cards. So then you are still having them be locked down to not being able to summon out any level 5 or higher monsters. I also run the 1 Evilswarm Bahamut. This is more of a card that can take an opponent's monster in its permanent control just by discarding an Evilswarm monster. 1 Thanatos during either player's turn, detaching 1 from this card, and this face-up card is unaffected by other monster effects this turn. 1 Ouroboros, it's more of a boss monster, needing 3 monsters as well, and being able to take care of a resource on the field somewhere. And also 1 Evilswarm Nightmare for the last of the Dark attribute Evilswarm monsters that we're running, for more of a quick effect Book of Moon against your opponent's monsters also. And then for the other monsters, I run 1 Evilswarm Exciton Knight and 1 Steelswarm Roach. Now, the Roach can be special summoned when you're locked under Goes in Match. Sadly, you won't be able to summon out Exciton Knight, but Exciton Knight's more of a dire circumstances kind of card where it can, just wipe out the field and still be used with other cards in the deck, including your Infestation Pandemic. And then having options for the shuffle back as well, being able to shuffle an Evilswarm monster from your hand or face on the field with cards like Infestation and Infection makes it all the better. For more of the generic Xyz monsters, I also run the 1 number 70 Malevolent Sin, 1 number 80 Rhapsody and Berserk to give your monsters on the field more of a power boost, Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon to also finish off the Xyz monsters, also just keeping to the Dark attribute to go into these cards. And then for the Link monsters, I run 1 Steelswarm Origin, more of a control card with this Link arrow, as well making it so your opponent, while this card is in the extra monster zone, if a monster would be special summoned from the extra deck, it must be special summoned to the zones this card points to, so more of a lock down against your opponent using this Link monster, and also 1 Wee Witch's Apprentice and 1 Underclock Taker. Underclock Taker is great just to get over some of the bigger monsters your opponent may have on the field for your Ophion to swing over, and Wee Witch's Apprentice, just another good Dark Attribute Link monster to boost the power of your other Evilswarm monsters on the field. As for some of the go-to plays in the deck is pretty simplistic with its plays. You just have to get out your Exceed Summon. So if you have the caster and just 1 additional Evilswarm monster, that could be the overlay needed to go into your monster of choice, being your Evilswarm Ophion. Now, if you have this play to rely on, then you can detach 1 off of the Ophion, and then with that, you have your search for your Infestation Pandemic. And then if you have at least 1 other trap in your hand, whether it be Torrential or Goes Unmatched, you can at least then have those 2 cards to shuffle on the field and then keep your opponent guessing with that play. If they try and build up a board to somehow get out an extract monster that's not level 5 or higher, before you can even do that, you can activate the Torrential Tribute and then chain the Infestation Pandemic to protect your Ophion on the field and still wipe clear any of the monsters your opponent may have on their side of the field. If you're going for more of a 3-card play as well, especially with the special summon power, you can go for the caster Heliotrope play with Mandragora. If your opponent has the monster, you can special summon out Mandragora, then summon out the caster and the Heliotrope. Going for the overlay again, but then this time as well, you could go for more of a play to go against your opponent, depending on the summon they may have. You can even use all 3 of the monsters to go into Ouroboros, or even keeping that 1 monster on the field, overlaying the 2 to then go for the play of your Bahamut. And with that, having that search, you having the 1 additional Evilswarm monster in your hand to discard, and taking that opponent's monster, which depending on its attribute, you can use with the additional Mandragora on the field to go into a Link summon of choice, depending on the monster, and also being able to even just keep it in the hand for the discard of the Bahamut to permanently take that opponent's monster also. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. It's a really fun control deck. If you're looking to play something that could definitely disrupt a lot of what we have currently in the format, this is definitely one to consider. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira, Twig out.